Welcome, everyone. This is Starting with Svelte. My name is Brittany Postma. I'm a developer experience engineer at Netlify, where I get to do all sorts of fun content like this. I also create content with codingcat.dev. We do a streamcast called perfect.dev, and we're starting a weekly Code with Coding Cat session on Fridays. I'm really excited about that. I also co-host 2 other podcasts. I know it's crazy how much I do. Remotely Interesting and Svelte Radio. And I'm also the founder of the Svelte Sirens. It's the first group of the Svelte community for women, non-binary people, and allies to learn, build, and teach about Svelte. We do live streams and guest talks there on the Svelte Society YouTube channel, so you can find out more about that at svelte.dev/chat is our Discord to get into that. And so finally, enough about me. So let's get into the actual Starting with Svelte stream. So when starting on a path of web development, there are so many choices and paths thrown at you. Figuring out which framework to learn and how to get started is one of the hardest decisions as a beginner. One will suggest getting a complete understanding of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript before jumping into a framework, while others will push you into popular frameworks that have a better job market, but complicated overhead. Both have their risk. Learning all of the fundamentals can add unnecessary complexity that modern frameworks extract, but a framework also adds its own level of abstraction that may confuse newer developers. What if I told you there was a framework out there that you can write vanilla HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in without the framework overhead? That language is Svelte. I'm suggesting that you can learn everything you need to know about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript inside of Svelte, while slowly taking advantage of the sugar syntax and the niceties that Svelte includes. So what is Svelte? Svelte is a powerful framework for beginner and advanced developers alike. Unlike other popular component frameworks that use a virtual DOM to diff the changes, Svelte is a compiler that takes the work out of the browser and into a build step that outputs, guess what? Vanilla HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Even the fancy declarative code you write in Svelte gets output as just JavaScript in the end. Svelte by itself is a component framework that allows you to break up your application into reusable chunks, built-in animations and transitions, and a state management system with stores. All of this is built into Svelte without adding any extra libraries, and if you don't use it, it compiles itself away. So why SvelteKit then? SvelteKit is the fastest way to start building your Svelte apps. Svelte is the language you write, but SvelteKit is the framework you use to get started building web applications. The goal with SvelteKit is to have a single recommended path for building everything from high-performing web apps to static blog pages. A file system-based router keeps your site organized, and each page can be rendered to optimize its performance. Hot module reloading with V and code splitting that makes your app blazing fast. Learning Svelte. You don't really need any special knowledge to start using Svelte today. Just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript will get you a long way. However, if you want to learn how to do some of the things the Svelte way, the tutorial is one of the best on the web. You don't need to have a local web environment to understand the command line or package managers to start using Svelte or SvelteKit. The Svelte REPL, Code Sandbox's svelte.new, and StackBlitz's SvelteKit.new all give you apps ready to start coding right in your browser. In fact, we're going to use StackBlitz's SvelteKit.new today for our demo. So let's get started with that. I'm going to X out here. And we will go ahead and get into our demo. So I'm going to head over to SvelteKit.new, and I can post that over in the chat as well. New. It's all you have to go to, and this will fire up the demo to-do app that SvelteKit provides in the CLI. So if you ran this in a terminal, you would write npm init svelte-add next, and then the name of your application, and that would get you a CLI tool that allows you to choose what you want to render, whether a skeleton application or a demo application, and this is the demo application. So this tutorial is designed to get you started by teaching the basics of HTML. We're going to use the free code camp Learn HTML by building I think it's a cat photo app, that they do. And we can actually take this entire code, even this HTML head code from the last lesson, in the free code camp tutorial and copy this, take it over to our index dot. So I guess that's the first thing that I should do here is so this fires up the app for you, but you may not know anything about the folder structure. So the folder structure in Svelte is a file system based router. So we have an SRC folder that includes all of our stuff for the actual application. There's a routes folder that holds any page that you need to create in your application. So inside of that folder, convention is to have an index file. And so this index.svelte file is actually this home page that we're seeing here. So if we take everything out of this home page, backspace that, and then I'm going to paste exactly what I copied from Free Code Camp, and that's with an HTML tag in it, with a body tag in it, stuff that we really don't need here, but this worked. Like everything actually just worked. And if we went and got, let's see if I can find a perfect dev image. Yeah, and I'm going to copy this link address and go to this URL here. So this is the form on the bottom of this. And if we paste that URL into the form and submit it, it actually works and sends it off to the Free Code Camp post. Like we didn't have to do anything. This HTML code just worked in Svelte, which is one of the most powerful things and why I think that you can just start learning it as a beginner. So, I mean, there's obviously things that we can remove here. So we can remove this HTML and body tag, and we can remove this HTML tag and this body tag. And then the head of the component, you can actually use something in Svelte called a svelte head. So if you do svelte colon head, and then my IntelliSense doesn't work in the Stack Blitz version, but this would autocomplete if you had the Svelte VS Code extension enabled, then that would have auto-completed that. But Svelte head will actually allow you to add in that title into the head of your application. So if we inspect this, we should see our head up here. We should see title. And you know what? I bet the app.html file has a head that's being injected into it. Okay, so I don't know how that works with Stack Blitz. So let's move on to the next thing I was going to talk about. But that does work there if you want to do the head component in Svelte. So I'm going to svelte.dev here. We can find the docs. I'll link that out for everyone. And if we look for the head component, Svelte head. So this is the way that we would do that. Yep. I just wanted to make sure that I was getting everything correct there. So Svelte head, and that will inject the title onto that page in your application if we avoid this. So now let's talk about components in Svelte. So I already mentioned that frameworks like Svelte and React are component-based frameworks, but what is a component exactly? In English, a component just means a part or a piece of a bigger thing. Hydrogen is a component of water. A tomato is a component of a tomato and mayonnaise sandwich. And inflation is a component of the economy. In web design, components are pieces of code that are extracted into a single file so it can be used anywhere in the application. There's no right or wrong way to create components in Svelte. You can lowercase or uppercase spell it. They can be in any folder. And in SvelteKit, you can even put them in the routes directory here if you make it with an underscore in front of it. So this layout that you see here is actually a special case. But if we did a new file and we just wanted to create something easy, we could name it like that. And that would be a component file in Svelte because it would get ignored by Vite when it builds. So in SvelteKit, the convention is to have a lib folder and have anything inside of that that you want to use inside your application. Like I said, you don't have to do this. This is just kind of a convention that comes with Svelte by default. So if we look inside that lib folder, we already have some components here built for us in this demo app. And I want to take a look at the header. So let me refresh this, and that will take us back to head attempted to close. Yeah, I got mad about that head. Okay, now it's fine. So this header component is repeated on each of these routes that we have. So we have an index route, an about app, and a to-do app, but it's included on every page. And it is doing that through this layout component that I was just talking about. So this layout component is importing this header from $lib header header.svelte. That $lib is actually an alias. And I want to briefly mention aliases because they could be confusing to new developers. So an alias inside of a framework is used to take the place of a file path to make the path name shorter and easier to write. In SvelteKit, this isn't required. You can type in the full path. So we could come here and we could type in import header from, and let's see, we're in the routes directory. So we need to go out of the routes directory into the lib directory and to the header directory, and then get that header.svelte file. And we can comment that out and it should still work fine. So that works as well. So you don't have to use that alias. You can use the relative path to import files, but that's a nice thing to have, and those can be configured. And I wrote a whole blog post on how to configure it. If you want to get into that, I'll link that over there. Make pathing easier with SvelteKit. So if you want to read more about that, there's that. So layouts in Svelte are another neat feature that come with it out of the box. There's base, named, and nested layouts. So this is a base layout in Svelte. It's just the default one that will wrap your entire application once you create a SvelteKit app with a __ layout.svelte, which is another thing that might trip some people up. So it uses this convention with the 2 underscores so that it can catch that in the build step to grab those and wrap the entire application with that. Oh, somebody's asking for the typing to be bigger. Sorry, I forgot to zoom that in. So for sure, we'll zoom that in a little bit. So a layout file in the routes directory named __ layout.svelte prefixed with 2 underscores will wrap the entire application in whatever's inside that file. And the content of each page is passed into an area called a slot. That's this right here. A slot is important in Svelte because it's a placeholder for where the children content should go in a wrapper component. So in the layout example, any other route or page created will drop into that area inside the main tag. So any page here is inside of the main tag if we inspect it. There's the main tag, and then inside of the main tag, we actually have the content placed through that slot based on all of these other routes. Slots can have a fallback added inside of them, so they don't have to be automatically closed like this. You could have a fallback placed here, fallback code, and then you just close that. Or they can be named also. So you can give them names in a component that needs to have different types of content, and then you would use slot equals that name as a prop, which we will talk about in just a minute. So thinking in modules, the ability to have modular components that can be reused in your app isn't new to front-end frameworks, but it could be confusing to new developers just starting. So we can look at components as small pieces of the page that are extracted into a single file, so they can be used in many places. These components get exported and can then be imported into other files with the import syntax. So these components that we see here are being exported under the hood, and then we're importing them into these other files using that syntax. So props, like I was just talking about, use that same concept in Svelte. So props in Svelte are pieces of data that are passed from one file down to another. Sometimes the term parent component to child component is used to describe this pattern. In Svelte, props are exported from the component that initiates them, and they can be used in a parent component to set the value of the data in routes. Props are also exported from the route to receive data from an endpoint. And we'll talk about endpoints in just a minute after I show what props look like. So let's see if we can do some props here, or see if we have any props. Okay, I don't see any props. Let me go ahead and create a new route. So I'm going to create a new route. And to do that in SvelteKit, all you need to do is to create a new file within that routes directory, and we can call that cats.svelte. And this will be a new route that will be at the cats point. So /cats will then be added to our account, and it's wrapping it with that layout file in the header and the footer, but we don't have any content on the page. And something I just noticed, oh, I didn't save it. I was like, that fallback isn't there, but it's still not there. That's kind of strange that that's not working either. That should be fallback here. wonder if something's broken in SvelteKit. So I guess something else to note with SvelteKit is that it's beta software, still not quite to 1.0 yet, and I have no inside information on that. If I did, I would so be happy to spill the beans because I want 1.0 to come out. So it's beta software. There's some breaking changes happening. There's lots of things that do change with it. But like I said earlier, the Svelte Discord is a great place for help and for communication on all of the changes that do happen. So if any of those happen, we can let you know there when we know about them. So in the cats file, I want to create a new prop. So to do that, I'm going to use that export command that I was just talking about with the modules. And we do that in a script tag. Just like vanilla JavaScript, we use a script tag and we say, I said left, export let cats. And this initiates a variable called cats that can be used in other files now because we're exporting it out of cats. We're allowing other files and components to be able to access that variable. So that cats variable, we're going to use in an endpoint. And an endpoint is a traditional web development. You would need to have a separate backend to connect your APIs, databases, or anything that needs to request data from a server. So you would need to set all that server stuff up. You would need to access it somehow from your front-end framework. And it was honestly like a lot of overhead that these newer frameworks like SvelteKit are trying to do away with and give you the ability to add these key features into these things called endpoints. And endpoints in SvelteKit allow you to work directly with HTTP requests and responses right from within your application. So endpoints are modules that are written in either JavaScript with a .js extension or TypeScript with a .ts extension. They export request handler functions. I've got a doc on that. I'm going to copy this link real quick and paste that over so you can see the docs on request handler, excuse me. And those correspond to the HTTP methods get, post, put, patch, and delete. The delete method is handled with a del function instead of delete because delete is a reserved word in JavaScript. So we can do that by creating, I'm going to use JavaScript today just to keep it as simple as possible. So we're going to create a new file and I'm going to call it cats.js. And this is what we call a page endpoint in Svelte. A page endpoint is an endpoint that has the same name in the endpoint as the route that it's directed to has. So these correspond to each other, and the things that we return from the endpoint are going to be able to go into this prop that we created, cats here. My voice is starting to go, so I apologize. So in the cats endpoint, we need to create a get request. So export const get, and then we're going to use an async function, error function here. And we're going to get a response from, and I'm using a couple of APIs here. Maybe I should link these over first. This one is the cat API. So that is this one. I love cat jokes and puns. We use perfect dev and coding cat dev. So anything I can use with cats is fun for me. Okay, so await fetch. And then we have an API that we can hit there. And I'm just going to copy this. I already have this little thing done. So this is the API endpoint, and we're going to limit this to 9 results here. And we are going to create another variable called cats, and we're going to await that response. And this is a JSON API, so we're getting JSON back. And then return that. And this is another SvelteKit convention. So we return the body. And I mean, you can use like typical headers and stuff, but this is the convention. I sometimes get confused with this because we're returning an object, and that messes with my head sometimes, to be honest. So I'm returning that cat's JSON data here in this body object, and that's going to go and populate this data here. But we need to do something with that data now. So in the markup section, we can use like normal, let's see, H1, and let's see if we can just get, I don't know what comes back from this. I don't think it gives us like a name or a type of cat on this API, which would be nice, but console.log. So we can write just JavaScript in the script tag too. So we're going to see on this cats route what is in this. Something is happening. Cat is not defined. Did I say cat? No, I did not. Oh, cat is not defined here. Okay. Oh, I see. Cats. And it's an array. So I need to do that. Refresh. Yeah, so I don't know. I'm doing something wrong with that. Console, where is my array? Array breeds. What can we use? We could use the URL here. So cats0.url. I just wanted to get something up there and to show that it will display that. If we use some like fancy sugar syntax to get into the JavaScript, we just use the curly braces. But what I really wanted to show is the power of using Svelte's templating here with the regular HTML. Like we could just type in, this is a group of cats or something here as just like plain HTML. This is a group of cats. So now we have that there. And then we can use this special Svelte syntax. And like I said, you can learn this incrementally, but this is the most powerful part of Svelte, in my opinion. So we're saying each cats as cat. So we're taking an array and we're looping over that array, but in a much simpler, cleaner syntax here. And we need to close our each block. So closing follows the same convention that HTML does with the slash. And it's the same thing that you would use. So we have if blocks, we have each blocks, we have async await blocks. There's several different kinds of blocks that you can use like this in Svelte. And inside of that, each thing that you are looping over is going to get whatever you put inside of that. So we're going to use an image tag, and we're going to get the src from the cat, and it's .url. That URL that we just showed, we're going to use that as the src here. And alt, unfortunately, because it doesn't have the name, I'm just going to put a cat because we need an alt, right? So I'm going to close this to make this a little bigger here. And we have just a bunch of 9 random cats on there in just 10 lines of code. Like that is like one of the most powerful things to Svelte to me, is that you can just do all of this so easily in Svelte and just incrementally learn these little bits and pieces. So the next thing I want to do quickly, because I know I'm kind of running close on time now, I think. I do want to show off some of these other. So we didn't do anything with this nav file. And we have that layout that wraps everything. We have to-dos, and this is also using these page endpoints here. You can also do a new folder and do like APIs. This is similar to how Next.js handles this. And you can create this cats.js file inside of here. We can just copy all of this and put it into this other one. And then we could do in this cats file, instead of doing this, we would still leave that because we would still need it, but you can do a script context equals module. And you do an export async function. And it's called load. And you grab the fetch out of that. And inside of that, we do const res equals await fetch. And we're going to await the ./API/cats dot. I don't know if the dot needs to be on it. And then console.log the rest. And we need to return props of res for now. And see what that does. We're on the cats. What's going on here? I'm sure I messed something up. Reading length. So the array. Oh, I'm just going to comment this out because we don't have an array of cats. This is a group of cats. Okay, so this is our response. Okay, so we got the response. So we just need to do const cats equals, it's kind of duplicating your work, which is why they created the page endpoint. But this will allow you to use an API folder if you want. What did I do now? Is it not JSON? Is that something? undefined. So I'm doing something wrong in this, but let me get in the SvelteKit docs. I didn't link those either. I'm going to link those over for everyone. We can see the docs on how to do the load function. Load function, fetch is .json. Did I not put I did put .json. I think so. Maybe this was a weird pattern that we had to do for a while in Svelte, and another reason why they got rid of it and allowed the use of just the page endpoints, which are much simpler in my opinion. I went off on a tangent trying to tell you that you could use this API folder if you want. So use those docs there and ask for help in the SvelteKit channel. I use the page endpoints all the time now because they're so much simpler. They take away all of that overhead of that file. So I'm going to delete that folder since that is clearly not working right for me. And in our cats file, I'm just going to take the module out and leave this. Take our console log out, put our cats back in, give me my cats back, and we have our cats back. Oh, cute kittens. I love the kittens. Okay, so the last thing that I wanted to talk about is adapters and deploying in SvelteKit, because this is a little bit different and this might be really confusing. So since SvelteKit is a versatile framework that allows multiple types of rendering, the built app needs to be adapted for different deployment platforms. So SvelteKit comes with an adapter auto that attempts to detect the production environment and select the more specific platform adapter. So if we look in our svelte.config.js file, we'll see that the adapter auto is automatically installed. And what happens is once you try to deploy, it will try to attempt to detect the platform that you're on. And it will, like if we're going to Netlify, which we will in just a second here, it's going to use the adapter Netlify. And so it's going to automatically detect the platform that you're using for the specific deployment platform and then install that adapter on that platform. And then there's also a Node.js adapter for platforms like Render and Heroku and DigitalOcean, I know, are a couple that you could use the Node server on. And then there's also static adapters. And static will pre-render your entire application. You can also pre-render routes, just like, so let's do this. Let's go to cats.svelte and real quick export let pre-render equal to true. And this will make this route only pre-rendered if we use a regular server-side rendered adapter. So now I have this connected to my GitHub already. So all you would need is a GitHub account. It's free to do that. And I would suggest if you're getting started with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to go ahead and get a GitHub account anyways. Learn in public. It's one of the best things I ever learned to do. And it's how I got both of my jobs. So just learn in public, do everything that you can public facing because it's so helpful in you learning, teaching yourself, and teaching others. It's great. So once you do that, you can actually just go ahead and create a GitHub repository for your application. So I'm going to name this CFE dev starting with Svelte. I'm going to create the repo and push it. And that's going to commit here. Could not resolve reference head. I don't know what that means. I didn't try this part, so this is fun. This is like live coding stuff that happens. It's always fun. I do a siren stream for the Svelte Sirens too, and it's like live coding is really interesting. You always run into fun stuff. Let's just go to GitHub and see if we have what we need. CFE dev. Yeah, so it already created it. It just made me think that it wasn't. And then I'm going to go over to my Netlify account and log in. And if you already have your GitHub account, it's really easy to just sync that with your Netlify. And you can go ahead and add a new site, import an existing project. So there's a couple of options there, but import an existing project means that it's going to link to your Git repository. So the Git repository that we just created straight from StackBlitz in our browser. I haven't left my browser. I haven't touched the command line. I'm still in the browser with all this and these nice GUIs that allow you to do that. Then we're going to search for that repository. Don't you fail on me. Wouldn't that be something? It did master branch, but it's automatically detecting our build command and our publish directory. And we're going to deploy the site. We'll see how long that takes to go there. We have nice fun games that you can play while you wait. I think it should be done in a second here, though. Oh, no. Like I said, I didn't try this part, so watch something. Build, npm run build. What happened? So if I did this from my... I swear I did this from my VS Code and it worked. This is using the CLI, and I have another account where, or another site where it just worked. Link this directory to an existing site. Oh wait, no, that's not what I want to do. That's not what I want to do. Git remote dash v. What's this link up? It's not a Git repository. So git init, gh repo, create. Sorry, this is using the command line. So I am using the command line now. I apologize. Because now I'm scrambling. Oh, you know what I want to do? I'm not even going to do this. I'm not even going to go the complicated way. I'm going to go, so I use pnpm. I'm going to pnpm I install to install all of my local things. And then I'm going to do a pnpm run build. And this is using the auto adapter. I want to show the static adapter at svelte.js/adapter-static at next. And that will install the next version. So since we're still in beta, it installs the next version, and then you have to add that there. And this is going to give us that static pre-rendered site. And I'm going to run that build command again. I don't know why the adapter auto didn't work, but it may be something with StackBlitz version, because StackBlitz has that template, that demo template, and it's using an older version than of SvelteKit. I'm sure of it. So there may be some, like, there have been weird, like, node environment things, like where you have to set your node environment sometimes. But I promise you that this did work when I ran it locally. So this is taking a while too. So if you need to come in and cut me off, Brian, at any time, just do that. I'm just going to keep working on it until you say I'm done.
Don't worry about it. Demo gremlins are...
Oh, I know. And I think the reason, though, is, so like I was saying, SvelteKit.new uses a version of SvelteKit that I bet is not. It says next, though. I wonder if it just installs the latest version. I don't know what's going on with that, but I should have tried this part. I apologize. I did just want to touch on the adapters, though, to make sure that people knew that deploying SvelteKit isn't as simple as just like pushing it out there. So that's the only part of it, though. I think the rest of it is so simple that you can just write HTML. And that was really the powerful part that I wanted to show.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think in the end, deploying is not that difficult. It's just...
It's a little...
it's a one-time thing once you get the right adapter and it's all working.
Yeah, I'm getting errors, like, even locally. So maybe, like I said, it's beta software. Sorry, folks.
Don't worry. I will say, like, I've messed with it, and
this cat is me right now. Like, that's
and been really impressed. Like, SvelteKit was awesome. And I'm sure, it's hard to do this live and in like 30 minutes. So it totally, I totally get it.
To my Netlify site and see if I swear I had one deployed at some point, because I did deploy one of them, but I'll see if I can get it out for you.
Okay. Well,
I do have SvelteKit sites that are deployed. I promise that. You saw the we have Svelte Sirens on Netlify right there. So that is a SvelteKit site, and it is deployed. There it is. Cats of SvelteKit. Yeah.
I think there are a number of sites out there that are run on SvelteKit already. That,
see, I told you I did this. There it is. Yeah, there's tons that are, I don't know what is going on today. Something is happening. So here it is. And I had a
Yeah.
little more in it. So I did a random that I didn't even get to today. So
I think, for those of us in the US, we got a long weekend coming up. I think all the servers are starting the weekend early. Don't
I'm
worry.
sweating. I'm like, oh, this live coding thing. It's just,
Um, oh, look at that. Brian says he's
oh,
moving all their
awesome,
sites to
Brian.
SvelteKit and loving it.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's fantastic.
I will say, my limited experience with it is it's super cool. As you note, the thing that I love about it is that it feels like I'm just writing HTML, I'm just writing JavaScript, and it's just like little helpers here and there, but it doesn't feel like it changes the way I'm writing. Like when I do React, for instance, um, it feels like I have to learn the React way of doing things, right? Whereas with Svelte, it feels like, okay, I'm doing JavaScript and it's just a matter of like, okay, what little helper do I need here or there to be able to
Exactly.
accomplish what I'm trying to do, like
It was like those
like the each
templating
and things.
blocks.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
exactly.
just those little things that read like plain English. And you can use HTML along with that incrementally learning those little each blocks and the templating
Yeah. Yeah.
syntax.
Well, yeah, if you've ever done I used to do a lot of stuff in Liquid and things like that. Like it doesn't feel that different from that, right? Like it's like
Yeah.
you just have little template helpers, and then the JavaScript is, I mean, for the most part, outside of like a few little things here and there that are like felt specific, but it's just JavaScript. So that's I think you did a good job of showing that, and that's the
Oh,
thing that
thank
to
you.
me is like really really powerful about Svelte, um, as well as the fact that like ultimately, because it does all that stuff at the build time, you don't like it's not like you need to download the whole Svelte framework. It compiles it down and only sends you what it needs to.
Yeah, it compiles. So even though that you get out of the box, like I didn't even show animations and transitions today, but you get like a lot of things out of the box, but they compile away if you don't use them. So it just compiles away to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So you're not putting a framework in the browser.
Hmm. Yep. Yeah, exactly. And Brian's been mentioning about shadow
Brian's
input.
shadow endpoints. Yes.
I know. When I started messing with it, they were like brand new when I ran into some issues with it. But because I'm like, oh, that's so much better than that
Yeah, that
API.json.js
stuff
file.
that I
Yeah.
was trying to do. Yeah.
Yes.
And that was a mess. So I'm glad that they did. I'm sad that they didn't call them shadow endpoints officially though. So when people bring out the shadow, I'm just like, yes.
Yeah, I know. And there's just page endpoints. I guess that's the less exciting name. We do have a couple of quick questions I want to get to. So I'm gonna forgive me if I mispronounce your name. Ariadne asks, I'm a backend developer currently. Could you say a few more words on routing in Svelte? And I think you mentioned the file-based routing, but like, um, how does that differ, say, from routing in other tools? And how can you give a little bit of a breakdown of that?
Yeah, I would say like Next.js, another popular React framework, uses a similar system where it's file system based routing. I think a lot of these newer frameworks are doing that. So anything that you create in the routes directory as a .svelte extension is a new page or route on your site. So like I created that that cats.svelte file, and that ended at the very end of your URL, the slash cats, that's where that page correlated to. So any route with a .svelte file will go to that. And then any endpoint, the .js file, if so this gets a little more complicated because of the .js and the .json. So we used to do the .json so you could actually go to cats.json and it would give you that. I don't know if you can still do that with the page endpoints.
Hmm.
I know there's a way. I don't know off the top of my head, though, exactly how you do that. But those do create routes. So even the endpoints are routes that you can hit.
Right. Right. Yeah. And like to just, I think those of us, for instance, who did Express once, but in other tools like that, right? Like you used to have to create the files and then you had to go into an app.js or whatever it is, and then go to your
Or hooking
router
a
and tell it,
router. Yeah.
yeah, and then tell it, hey, that file, like on this route, send it to this file, etc. So all of
Yes.
that's automatic for you now. And again, if you are doing like Next.js, the router in SvelteKit basically feels the same. It's like
It
a
does.
Next.js. It's just, whatever you put in that folder becomes a route
Yep. And I
or
think
root, depending on
Next.js
how you
uses
pronounce
that, yes, that API folder that I was trying to do. That's how they do their endpoints. So they go into the API directory inside of the routes directory, right?
it.
If I'm not
Yes, yes,
mistaken.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
but it's not a routes directory. It's content or something. I don't remember what the
Oh,
directory
okay.
is. But yeah, if you put the API in there, that's where you're supposed to put it. But okay. So Brian says you can also do param space routing with variables in
Yeah.
the file name.
So that is what I did on this random page here, but I didn't show that, but I can link the GitHub repository. I can't talk either.
Yeah.
So I'll find that and I'll link that real quick to show
Right. Yeah,
those.
that's a good point. He makes a good point about you can do let me put your screen back up if you want. Um are you
Oh, I was just looking for it. I think this is
Oh,
it.
okay. Um so yeah, you can do dynamic routes where you
Yeah,
put
that's
those brackets and even like catch-all routes, right? You have catch-all route where you like do the double brackets
yes, you
and
can
that'll
do
catch
the
anything. Yeah.
well, no, you do it with the dot 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 syntax. So it's like spreading an
Oh, right.
object, but you
Right.
do that in front of the route name, and
Okay.
that will catch everything.
That's it. So you can have catch-all routes and like even your folders can be the bracket, right?
Yeah, you
Um,
can nest, and there is a request for comments right now. Rich is talking about redoing the entire routing structure, and we're trying to talk him out of it because it's like we're so close to 1.0. Stop making breaking changes. So go out. I'll find that too real quick and link that. So
okay, so we got one other question about accessibility. Like,
yeah.
how does accessibility figure into Svelte and Svelte?
So, Svelte is actually one of the best frameworks for accessibility because they give you accessibility hints and warnings right inside of your markup. So, like I said, that Svelte for VS Code extension in VS Code, if you're using that as a tool, will give you those hints and warnings if you don't have an alt tag on an image or, like, I don't know, there's various things that it will just warn you about and help you with accessibility because we try to put accessibility first. So, it's just making you have best practices with accessibility, and nothing is perfect. Like no framework can do the job for you. So you still have to test and do your accessibility due diligence, but it does give you a lot of warnings and helpful things that help
Right.
you get to the best place.
Yeah, I recall when when I was using it, like when you ran the compiler, it automatically would tell you like as you're building, it would give you accessibility
Yep.
warnings in the console, like, hey, you should do this and that. Yeah. So I
And there's
thought,
that request for comments. I just posted in the chat there. So,
oh, you're trying to get us all on there to like tell him
oh, I know.
not
I'm
to
just,
change stuff.
yeah, please don't.
I would agree. I mean, it feels like I think, it's very like I said, it's very similar to Next.js, but I don't think that's a problem because it makes it easy to move from one to the other without having to like learn a whole new routing system. So, um, but yeah, I think uh, again, so yeah, accessibility we said built in. So obviously you don't have any insight. So right now it's not SvelteKit is not at 1.0, but you can use Svelte. Like Svelte is like a
Yes.
1.0.
So Svelte is actually in 3.0 right now. They're talking
Okay.
about plans for 4.0. So Svelte itself, it's a client side if you just ran it like that. Like React is a client side thing too. So Svelte itself is the compiler, the language. That part of it is 3.0. It's stable, it's fine. You can use that by itself, but you would need to add in like the router and the things that we were talking about with React sometimes you run into. Those are things that you would have to add into regular Svelte. But
Mhm.
SvelteKit is kind of becoming this. The goal is to have that be the place to start everything for Svelte. But you can still use Svelte if you need to, like in bits and chunks. But to start a new application, start with SvelteKit, even if it's
Okay.
in beta and there's problems.
Yeah.
Sapper was the old framework that was used. And so it was kind of confusing for developers going from like Svelte, should I use Svelte or should I use Sapper? But now SvelteKit's going to kind of be all of them. So you can do client side
Right.
rendering, static generation, or server side rendering, or a hybrid mix of all of them.
Right. Right. Yeah. That is a good point, which you didn't really get to talk about, which is that you can do server side rendering, you can statically render, or as you kind of showed in that last bit, you can say, hey, this particular
That
route
pre-render, yeah.
is pre-rendered or statically rendered, and then the other route is server side rendered.
I feel like that concept, I wanted to talk about that, but I'm trying to like keep this like more beginner friendly of people that are actually like learning HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And it's hard for me to choose like which things to like learn when you're doing that. And
Yeah,
rendering is like a foundational skill, but I feel like it's so complicated and hard to discern that I try to like stay away from it. I just wrote a
yeah.
whole blog post on rendering and it was like way too long. I'm like, this is complicated.
I know. I wrote a massive blog post on rendering. It's on the
I
Bejanos or
read your
Behamas.
blog post and
Yeah.
notes for mine.
Yeah, and it was super, super long because then you get into like, I don't know, does SvelteKit have middleware or anything like that? Any of this like edge functions kind of thing built
So
in
yeah,
or
so
not yet?
those endpoints are where you would write those functions. So they would connect to your other, like, so if you're using a CMS, you would connect to that in an endpoint. If you're using a
Yeah.
database, you would connect in an endpoint. Um, you just said edge functions. So edge functions work in an endpoint. So you would just write the endpoint and that would return your endpoint back to your Svelte file,
Okay. Yeah, because in
your
Next.js they
edge
added
function data.
something like a newer thing called like middleware, which would be like, okay, I could run it before I hit that API endpoint. I'd run the middleware would run at the edge, and then you'd run the API endpoint. You could have middleware that ran again at
No, there
either end
is.
of that. But anyway, yeah,
Here's
it's
here's what
new.
I
It's
got when I
totally new.
searched SvelteKit and middleware, and I'm sure that we do. I just haven't used middleware, so I don't know exactly.
Yeah.
But it brought up modules, so I think it's called something different. It says handle sequencing multiple handle calls in a middleware like manner. So I think it's like middleware, but
Yeah. Okay.
I just posted that.
Awesome. All right. So yeah, and I don't see any more questions, but sounds like you have convinced some people about Svelte and
Sweet.
SvelteKit already.
You can't even see
And
my shirt. I'm like all out today.
yeah. Now you need to combine that with your Netlify swag and have a
Once I get it, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
These supply chain issues are killing me.
Oh, and Brian, one last thing. Brian mentioned adapter will put Svelte endpoint code into the edge functions. Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
there's an adapter for edge. Okay. An edge adapter,
Well,
sounds
no,
like.
there's not an edge adapter. So, like on Netlify, I was trying out the edge functions and I used adapter Netlify and I couldn't get them to work locally. But when you deploy, you can see the actual like localization and the things that the edge functions give you are returned from that endpoint into your route.
Okay. Okay. All right. I definitely got to check it out again because I built something with it, and then my job is to mess with a lot of these things. So like I move on to like something else, and then something else, and I feel
I
like
have
I
a
never
couple
get
of
to dive
issues out
deep.
on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So